In our last two videos, we talked about different kinds of production processes, focusing on job and batch production. Let's quickly remind ourselves of what we mean by these important key terms. Job production involves a one-off production of a one-off order, while batch production refers to producing batches of identical products before creating another batch of products with some kind of tweak. In this video, we're going to focus on the final production process, flow production, where large batches of identical products are produced at the same time. It's important to note that flow production may also be referred to as mass production, so try to avoid any confusion with these particular terms. Flow production is typically used for mass-produced goods and describes the continuous output of identical products in large quantities, sometimes very large quantities. You might not realise it, but if you look around your home, in a supermarket or in other larger retailers, you'll see lots of mass-produced goods that have been made using flow production. Many everyday foods, such as cans of baked beans, breakfast cereals or sliced bread, are actually manufactured using flow production. Most of the clothes you wear will have been mass-produced using some kind of flow production technique. If your family has a car, then it's pretty likely that it will have been mass-produced. Your mobile phone, the fridge in your kitchen, the TV in your living room, and the PlayStation sat next to it will all have been made using at least some flow production techniques. With flow production, during the actual manufacturing, each item moves continuously, or flows, from one stage of the process to another. The process usually involves specialization. For example, an assembly line, where the process is broken down into a series of stages with individuals specializing in each one of those stages. To help us understand this topic in a little more detail, let's introduce Dawn Daniels, the founder and managing director of Tough Steel Motorcycles. Dawn is crazy about motorbikes and has been ever since she can remember. She originally started the business from her own small garage, and it has grown considerably over the years. After a couple of successful years, the business went from being a successful partnership to a limited company, and it now has over 30 shareholders. The business now makes mass-produced motorcycles which are sold in showrooms around the world. All motorcycles are made to the same high standard in the same factory based in Stoke-on-Trent. Believe it or not, Dawn and her team produce 100 motorcycles each day. As you can imagine, building a bike to this standard is a pretty full-on process, and the team at Tough Steel would be unlikely to produce this many bikes if they were not operating a flow production line. To all the teachers out there, show all of these videos without any ads and gain access to our growing library of over 500 teaching worksheets. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? When Dawn started Tough Steel Motorcycles, she wasn't using flow production there. She didn't have the spec to set up a production line in her garage, or the money to invest in all of that technology. Instead, Dawn was using a job production process, making each bike by hand from start to finish all herself. Each bike was unique, but the time that it took was insane. Dawn would sometimes struggle to produce 3 bikes in an entire week. Over the years, as the business has expanded, Dawn has been able to reinvest some of her profits from these early years into the necessary specialist machinery and the high-quality staff training that has now allowed her to improve the production process. They are making over 100 bikes per day, and Dawn wants each one to be consistent in every way and meet her stamp of approval. This consistency is one of the most important aspects of flow production. Each item is identical to the one that came before it. Every single bottle of Coca-Cola is just as good as the one before, and just as good as the next one will be. So let's have a look at this continuous production process the bikes go, or even flow, through. Firstly, the bike's main mechanical components need to be assembled, starting with the bike frame. Once the frame has been assembled, the bikes move along a conveyor belt and are fitted with other parts, such as the engine and the fuel tank, which are added at different stages along the production line by members of staff with different specialisms. Once the mechanical components have all been added and tested, the bikes are painted and finished. They then move down the production line again, and the seats and tyres are added. After this, they then move down again to a testing and quality control stage where they are thoroughly inspected. And finally, the finished bikes are parked neatly in a large shipping container ready to be sent to showrooms across the globe. Over the years that Tough Steel Motorcycles have been in business, Dawn's production team have perfected this process so that it is as efficient as can possibly be. They now have a specialist team trained to deal with each stage of building the bikes: painting, finishing, quality control and testing, and the use of specialised technology is there at each stage. The combination of having specialist workers at each stage of the process and using this specialist technology means that the motorbikes can be produced quickly and efficiently. Not a second is wasted, and during the 10 hours the factory is operating, bikes are constantly moving along this production line. Bring this video and over 100 more to life with fun, interactive games, quizzes and case studies. Why not try the first 25 completely free by visiting BizzWizard.co.uk. Often, one of the real keys to a successful flow production line is ensuring the staff are highly trained in the task that they will complete. As part of this training process, Dawn likes to give her employees the opportunity to work in different areas of the production line, so that they have an understanding of how the whole process actually fits together. She finds that some of her workers do like to rotate the jobs, as the tasks that they complete can get a little old, whereas others enjoy taking pride in their very specialist areas and they have completed the same task 100 times a day for years. So let's think about the advantages to Dawn's business of using a flow production process. When Dawn first started out, it was incredibly time consuming to make each bike using job production. And the process is simply so much quicker now that Dawn has these facilities to be able to mass produce. Once Dawn was able to invest in more automation, the technology has actually helped her keep her costs of production down. These savings have been available to make other improvements in important business areas. By using specialisation, Dawn has found that the production process is much more efficient, and her workers have become very skilled in their particular tasks, making them, again, much quicker. And as Tough Steel Motorcycles are producing bikes in large quantities, Dawn can achieve economies of scale, resulting in a lower average cost per unit, or I guess in this case, per bike. Each of the video courses over at BizzWizard.co.uk also includes an interactive business case study that applies the knowledge learnt to a real-world scenario. There are over 1,000 multiple-choice questions, each with detailed feedback, which tests students' understanding of the content. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? But as with each of the production processes that we have examined, there are a number of disadvantages to flow production for Tough Steel Motorcycles or any other business considering this production process. As Dawn now knows from experience, it can be very expensive to set up this kind of production line, particularly for a startup business. Dawn had no choice but to build her business from scratch using job production techniques back in those early days because of these significant upfront costs. It was actually quite some time before she eventually had enough capital behind her to invest in the premises, equipment and technology needed to move towards flow production. Although the tasks on the production line at Tough Steel Motorcycles are very specialist and require lots of training, they can become pretty dull and repetitive. Dawn has had to invest a lot of money in training so that her employees stay motivated and productive, including giving them the opportunity to work in different areas and rotate the tasks that they complete. She has also had to make sure that she has enough supervisory staff in order to make sure everyone is doing what they should be doing. The wages of these supervisors are relatively expensive, but it's just a cost that she has to pay if she wants to make sure that her team is as productive as possible. Flow production is really great when everything flows, but if there's a problem at any stage of the production line, there may be a complete shutdown, which could have serious repercussions on output, and therefore on sales. Dawn needs to make sure that there are regular checks and maintenance of the entire production line to make sure that everything keeps working, which again costs a lot of time and also a lot of money. To keep production going, Dawn has to make sure that there are enough stocks of components and materials to keep the production moving at all times. This means that there is a considerable amount of Tough Steel's cash which is actually tied up in stock. The final disadvantage we will consider is that in some circumstances, mass-produced goods are not always the best quality, and any defaults may take time to be discovered as the item is moving continuously through the production line. Dawn is not willing to sell a single bike that doesn't meet her high standards, so she's had to invest more money in quality control and quality assurance to make sure that the bikes produced in her factory meet her high standards all of the time. So, there you have it. We have now explored each of these important production processes. However, sometimes it's not as simple as one process or another. We can explore each process individually, but in some cases a business might actually use a hybrid approach to production. Part batch, part flow. Even in some cases, part job. For example, a cake factory may constantly produce the same basic cakes. They are made on a continuously moving production line, but once the basic cakes are made, they are then divided into batches and decorated separately. In a car factory, elements of batch or even job production might be applied. For example, if a customer orders a car with alloy wheels or leather seats that do not come as standard, then they are getting something custom made for them. So the basic car was flow production, but once it has been kitted out, it is now a hybrid production process. Part job production, part flow production. Okay, so we've looked at the characteristics of flow production and we've seen that it's used to produce large quantities of identical items, often using technology and specialization. In an exam question, you may be asked to compare flow production with job or batch production. So make sure that you use all the information provided and you relate everything back to the case study that you have been given. The main thing that you must take away from this important topic is that flow production, well, it flows. Each item is identical to the one that came before it, and therefore things can be made in huge quantities. In fact, in some cases, absolutely ridiculous quantities. Did you know that it is estimated in factories across the globe that 1.8 billion Coke drinks are produced every single day? That sounds like absolute madness until you hear that more than 10,000 Coca-Cola drinks are actually consumed every single second. I mean, just imagine if you had to make each and every one of those one at a time. This has been the BizzWizard. See you in the